and thank you for joining us for today's Wendt Partners monthly web event on HubSpot. I'm Doug Wendt, the President and Chief Growth Officer of Wendt Partners. I'm joined by Anya Tijerina, who is our Platform Solutions Team Lead. Hello, Anya. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. Awesome. We've got our northern vibe here. Anya's in Cleveland. I'm in New York. So hello to Cleveland. I was just there actually a couple weeks ago. We all got together and did a working session. It was great to be on Lake Erie in the beautiful home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For those who haven't been to Cleveland, you must visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's spectacular. So we're really excited to have you all join us today. I want to thank you in advance for taking your time out to talk with and learn about HubSpot. And today's topic is building your RevOps tech stack with the power of the HubSpot ecosystem. So that's a mouthful. Marketing, tried to throw all the important buzzwords into one sentence to make sure we covered everything. So we got RevOps, we got tech stack, we got power, we got HubSpot, we got ecosystem. So we've got a lot to talk about today. And there are a couple of things that I want to zero in on. But the first one is just understanding sort of our framework of discussion here. So when people think about HubSpot, they often have very different understandings of what HubSpot is and what it can do, depending on what their initial interest was or how they first heard about the platform. So in today's discussion, we're going to talk about HubSpot. Then we're going to talk about the world of technologies and solutions that sits around HubSpot. That's what we call the HubSpot ecosystem. Okay. And we want to talk about that in the context of RevOps, which is a blanket term that I'm using to describe every part of your business involved in generating revenue. And that, I think, really kind of recenters the conversation. So I'm actually going to pull up a screen here. And Anya, I'd love to get your perspective on when you describe HubSpot to people in a nutshell, as knowing all the things that it can do itself, how do you kind of put that story together for folks?
Yeah, so I think, the biggest thing that we're talking about today is RevOps, which has been an industry hype word for the past few years. It's essentially like the gluten-free or non-GMO of the business world. And so, long and short, like what we're trying to do is we're trying to enable teams to work across departments in unison to achieve revenue goals, streamline efficiencies, make strategic decisions, but making those strategic decisions based on, the entire company versus, by individual teams, departments, operations. And so when we talk about HubSpot, that's really what we're trying to do is we're trying to align teams in one place where they can share information and consistently work across multiple channels with multiple clients, companies, et cetera, and just give them all of the tools possible to streamline all of their business practices because we're here to make money and we don't want to spend time, trying to dig for data. We don't want to spend time, trying to touch base on where people are in their life cycle stage or their buyer's journey. So that's really what we're trying to do when we're looking at framing HubSpot is where are your gaps? Where do we feel that communication breaks down? Where do we feel we're spending more time? And then how do we lean that out to reduce steps, which ultimately is going to reduce your overhead because, you could spend 5 hours, a couple hours a day trying to look for things. And over a course of a year, you're at 5,000, 10,000 extra dollars in time that you're putting into your job, looking for things that, we want to make available. So I would say that that's like the biggest thing is really when we're talking about HubSpot, when we're implementing HubSpot, we're looking to streamline efficiencies and bring data forward. So that way everyone is on the same page across every department.
And let's talk a little bit about, we've got these different hubs here, or at least that's what HubSpot calls them. Um, how do they relate together, Anya? Are these separate pieces of software? Are they things that when I add one hub to another, is it like two different databases? Tell me a little bit about, how all this fits together.
So it's all one platform. So regardless of if you have marketing, if you have sales, if you have service, it's all in that navigation. So you start with a free pack of anything that you haven't purchased, and you have the access to the free version of software. So again, regardless if you're on Marketing Pro, Sales Enterprise, and you don't have any of the other hubs, you still have a free version that's available to you. So it really does create one single platform in which you can operate in. And the other thing to call out is the user experience. Sometimes when you're jumping around different places in other softwares, you can tell that you've been taken to an application or you've been taken outside of the system. In HubSpot, we are, it's a consistent user experience. What you see on a contact record is going to have the same feel when you open a company record. So at the end of the day, one system, one user experience, just with some nuances that allow you for a little adaptability to whatever department you're working in.
So let's actually just take a moment and talk through these hubs. So we've got Marketing Hub, marketing automation software. We've got Sales Hub, so that's our sales CRM, right, for managing sales opportunities, prospects, deals, and so forth. So in many cases, right, we generate a lead through our marketing efforts, we hand it off to sales for them to turn into a deal or an opportunity, and then keep the flow. If you don't mind, Anya, where do we go with the service and some of these other tools?
Yeah, so Service Hub is what enables service teams to deliver consistent and great customer experiences. So anything from support ticketing, customer portals, knowledge base, all of those things are available to you there. We have our CMS Hub, so that is your platform in which your content management system. So this is where you can develop content for your website, organize content, and you have a lot of access to free themes, things like that. So you don't have to be a developer. You can actually just kind of build a website in HubSpot. And then we have Operations Hub. Obviously, this is a hub that has a lot of value, especially when you are a team that's really data driven. So you want to have really consistent data. You want to have a lot of really good data integrity. You want to be able to report and have advanced functionality that's going to allow you to bring that data to the front and actually have it be useful data. Or the number one thing that I always hear is consistent data. I don't have like the eye for detail that some have where they're like, everything's not capitalized, or Doug's like, stop putting a space there. Um,
I
so that's the
don't
thing.
know what you're talking about. Yeah, actually, I totally know what you're talking about. Yes.
They're like the things that you can fix with Operations Hub. So whether it's really, really advanced functionality or you just want to capitalize a first name, it has a pretty broad spectrum of things that you
Right.
can do with it. And
So
then
really it should be CMS Hub, and then for people like me, OCD Hub. I got the message. Yes, that's right.
exactly. And then we have our new,
Operations critical processing, or excuse me, operations critical development, OCD.
there
All
you go.
right.
It's
Uh,
perfect. And then the new addition of Commerce Hub. So really just bringing everything full circle, being able to invoice and take payments and things like that all in one platform. So again, streamlining that user experience. You can send a quote and take a payment right from HubSpot. There's really no way to bring like a closure to that loop than having that all in one place.
mm. So this really is like if I take this process flow, or if I look at these individual tools, I have 6 components that when used together create a complete customer journey, right? On the web, in email, and we'll talk about other things too. All of my different forms of communication and my different updates are being managed in one environment.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, let's actually take a look in HubSpot for a few minutes here. I pulled up, my version with my 258 tabs, enough to give people a heart attack. So sorry for those of you who have a bit of trouble with tabelepsy, as I call it. But we're looking inside HubSpot. This is a live account, not a demo account. This is actually the Win Partners account. We're looking at my contact record here. And the first thing that I just want to reiterate, exactly to Anya's point, is all of these different capabilities. We've got the sales tools, we've got the service tools. These are literally just menus, that the switches that you turn on to add access to functionality. It's one database, it's one piece of software. Everything operates as one system. Okay. If it's a HubSpot function, it's done in one piece of software. And in fact, if you look at the market for these kinds of products, you'll notice something interesting. So HubSpot, I'll give you a comparison. HubSpot, Salesforce, that's one that's done a lot. In 25 years since it was founded, Salesforce has purchased 72 different companies. 72 different companies. And in the vast majority of cases, put their logo on that product and then resold it as their own. The problem with that, of course, is that they didn't write that product. They didn't develop that product. You might as well buy somebody else's product. There's no particular benefit other than maybe having one salesperson to deal with at Salesforce. Okay. That's totally different than HubSpot's philosophy. We call that the cobbled approach. Okay. And the reason why it's done in this industry is it's a great way to make a lot of money, but it's a terrible way to serve customers. In contrast, HubSpot has purchased 7. Okay. 72, 7. And when HubSpot purchases a company, HubSpot will take typically about 18 months to rebuild whatever was acquired completely natively into the HubSpot platform. Okay. So for example, Anya, let's talk a little bit about Operations Hub. What was Operations Hub originally? Because that started as an acquired product.
Yeah, so Operations Hub was really something built out to help us sync systems. So bringing in data from other systems, making sure that you are able to still operate in your daily. We're not telling you to overhaul your whole tech stack and throw it all out the window because HubSpot can do it all. I think that's something that we've been seeing more often is, oh, it's just one product. One product does everything. But HubSpot doesn't necessarily approach those things. You can do it for sure if you wanted to, but we do understand that taking time to move off of your current ERP system or, change the way that you're currently, running some of your sales efforts, or that you have like a custom solution that's built out for your company. Really just the number one thing was to be able to bring data, share data, and bring it into HubSpot and, be able to access it in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
So, over the time, we've seen a lot of improvements. We've seen, things as far as like data integrity and hygiene being a really, really big focus for the platform. And now, we have a really robust tool that allows you to do a lot of complex data functions within the platform itself.
Yes, and we're actually in HubSpot right now. And the other thing you'll notice is there's no place that you go that says Operations Hub. It's because it's literally a set of capabilities built natively into the platform. So some of the Operations Hub capabilities are under automation, some are in reporting and data, others are in CRM, library, or development tools. This is one of them. This is our data modeling capability. So if you have a complex implementation, and you want to make sure that your business processes are properly configured and modeled in HubSpot, we have this modeling tool that demonstrates the relationships visually and allows you to dig in and look at how records are related to one another in real time. So you can see this is an actual list of client portal records, which is a custom object in our database, and how they tie together to others. So again, enterprise capabilities, 100% native in the platform. I didn't have to go log into something else. It works and operates just like anything else in HubSpot because it is HubSpot. So when we go back to that contact record, everything that we're seeing in here, whether it's marketing activity, sales activity, service tickets, activity on the website, did Doug visit the website? What pages did he look at? What else is he doing? The data quality from operations, any purchases that he made. All of this information is simply happening. It's all made available here automatically through the power of a single platform environment. So again, the reason we started here is because of the fact that when people talk about ecosystems or extensions, they often start from the perspective of, well, the core piece of software, it starts from a negative. Okay, which is like the core piece of software doesn't do X, Y, and Z. So I have to go outside of it and look for other tools. So our message is, guess what? 85% and sometimes 100%, okay, of what you're looking to do, you can do natively in HubSpot without any extensions or outside products. It just so happens that we have an extremely powerful ecosystem to extend HubSpot, often for industry specific or use case specific requirements. But natively inside HubSpot, you've got 6 different hubs all operating as one piece of software because it is one piece of software. Boy, I can sound like a broken record on this one, can't I, Anya?
I think that's the thing that, we really want to call out though, is that while HubSpot is a place where you can operate and do, like you said, 80%, 100% of your business, I think the other thing that makes HubSpot a little bit different is obviously the understanding that there is opportunity to use applications that are outside of the system that maybe are going to increase adoption or maybe are just a little bit more intuitive to users. When we're talking Operations Hub, and we're talking programmable automation, things like that. There is a need to be able to code a bit.
Right.
And, not to give away any tips or tricks or anything like that. But with the use of ChatSpot AI, you now can ask it to build you a code and put it into Operations Hub. And it's a complete way to enable teams to do the work and not have to take things outside of the system. But there is, obviously we look for like that recommendation of 7 to 10 applications really isn't like outside of the realm of possibilities. And that's because we want to integrate fully into your business and not just have everything be brought into HubSpot, but bring HubSpot outside to the other applications that you're using. Um,
Mm.
so I think that that's, the other thing is, you know, not trying to sell it all as, this is an all-one, all-encompassing thing. There is opportunity, and there are some really great applications that are going to enable your teams to do a lot of work themselves. And, maybe not having to bring in an internal development team or not having to have someone come in and like spend all their time in HubSpot, because we have applications that are going to do a lot of the work for you. But the other side of that is now we're seeing a lot of the applications that we've been using outside of HubSpot are now being brought in and incorporated into HubSpot. So
Hmm.
things like, SMS, that's a new feature that we're currently seeing roll out. And, for a while we had to go outside of HubSpot for those things. So these are just really great things that we're kind of noticing now is that we don't necessarily have to go outside. It's more a matter of preference and what's comfortable because the number one thing is adoption. If your people aren't going to use it, or you're going to try and overhaul everything and say, hey, I know that you used to do this, but now we're bringing it all into HubSpot, it
Right.
really does lead to like poor user adoption. And the number one thing that we want when you're going into a new system, is people to come in, have it be intuitive, have it make sense, and be able to like kind of pick up right where you left off. We don't want to lose any like traction. We don't want to lose any sales. We want to just be able to make that switch.
So you bring up an interesting point, and I want to mention one thing before we switch to the ecosystem, and that is HubSpot's acquisition of Clearbit. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when we talk data enrichment, there's obviously a lot of different platforms that you can go to. When we see a lot of people come in, obviously they're using things like Outreach, they're using Zoom Info. And what you realize there is that you're relying on applications that are built to sync your data to HubSpot. And those applications are built by providers, and it's not always necessarily specific to your business use case. If you have a very standard business use case, a lot of the times these things work really, really well. But there's things that we want to bring in that maybe are just kind of like outside of the normal sync. And that's where, bringing in that actual enrichment tool into HubSpot is going to be a complete game changer. No longer are you going to be limited to, we can, we can do this for email, or maybe we can only sync, updated last names or things like that. Like this is all going to be something that's built into the system. So while we do have like some of our HubSpot generative AI where it goes in and it fills out, company info and things like that, these things are now going to be in the system, available to you and without
Yes.
having to integrate.
And that, as I think one person called it, this is like your ingredients included CRM, right? Like a CRM exists to manage important data, and now we're going to be able to natively provide that data as part of your CRM journey. I thought it was a brilliant move, and no one's come close to what HubSpot is doing in that space. So you brought up a really good example, Anya. Really good. So let's talk about this ecosystem of which we speak a little bit. So I just want to give a little bit of context and then we'll actually dig in. So if you're an existing HubSpot customer, you'll see how you can go ahead and find tools to add to your HubSpot build. Um, so the app ecosystem for HubSpot, similar to your, App Store for your iPhone, or your Google Play Store for your Android, same idea here. Um, There are over 1,500 applications in the HubSpot app ecosystem. Just to put some context here, 750,000 people are using these applications actively in any given week. There are almost two. In fact, actually, this is outdated. We know we just confirmed HubSpot has exceeded 200,000 customers worldwide. The average HubSpot customer installs about 7 apps. We typically see between 5 and 10 of these apps. Okay. Overwhelmingly, customers use at least one. And I think that's going to set the right framework now for us to take a look at what kinds of things we can achieve by looking at these apps and seeing what's in there. So if you are wondering how to find the ecosystem, you can go to ecosystem.hubspot.com and click on App Marketplace. And that's what we're looking at here. So this is the directory of the over 1,500 applications. Of the 1,550, okay, you'll find that about a third, just under five, well, about just a little bit less than that, about 400 are HubSpot certified. We're going to come back and talk about what that means in a few minutes. But Anya, in your experience implementing clients, what are the kinds of use cases or tools that you typically see? This is actually showing us an order of most installed. So that's a starting point. But what do you typically see as the kinds of connectors or app marketplace ecosystem tools that people are setting up?
Yeah, I say like it really ranges. It depends on your business needs, what you're trying to accomplish. But the ones that I would say are most common is we see, HubSpot for WordPress, being able to bring in your website, embed forms directly from the back end of your site versus having to like go in and grab a code and add tracking codes and things like that. So if you're on WordPress, it's a really, really great, it's a really great tool because it gives you, again, it just takes a step out of things. You know that it's connected, you know that information is tracking and it's bringing in insights. The big things that we also see are anything that has to do with, Google Analytics, being able to bring in that kind of data. Calendars, being able to set meetings. So any kind of, if you're on Zoom, if you're on WebEx, whatever it is, bringing in those tools so you don't have to change what you're doing. You can still operate normally and bring that into your calendar invites. So I think when we kind of are starting from like that base like framework, it's really just taking the things that you're currently doing and looking for the opportunity to integrate that information. So I would say that's, really big. LinkedIn Sales Navigator obviously is really upped its game with the integration. So that's one that I also want to call out. And for our marketing teams, Canva. So you don't have to be, in the HubSpot, like drag and drop. You can actually design things outside of HubSpot and embed them if you're more comfortable in that tool versus kind of learning something else. So you can learn the tool at your pace, but still maintain your marketing programs. So these are all kind of things that again, we want you to maintain business as usual and just adopt HubSpot as you begin to work in the tool more.
Excellent points. And I want to call out, you'd mentioned the Sales Navigator one. I'm going to mention that one and the Slack one as well. So let me just take an example, because I think these give really good examples. And then another one that we'll talk about a couple of others. But so every company who develops an app or integration could take a different approach. Okay. In the case of the LinkedIn connector, what it actually does is it puts what we call a CRM extension card into your HubSpot environment and then allows us to perform actions that actually take place in LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So this send email button here allows me to actually send an email from my LinkedIn account to this contact right from here. Okay, so I'm doing a LinkedIn action, but I'm doing it inside HubSpot. And then in addition, we have this modal that opens up that allows us to see essentially a full screen or a near full screen view of LinkedIn information while staying in my HubSpot environment. So it's just popping up that data right now. So what you're seeing is I can do things natively in HubSpot and I can bring other applications inside HubSpot and perform actions in them. Okay. So very, very powerful tool. I use this every day, all the time. And it really gives you a lot of value and a lot of information to stay on top of your LinkedIn relationships and how they relate to what you're doing in your HubSpot, in your CRM activities. So that's one example. Okay. Another one that I want to mention, which I'm just going to describe, not so much show, is the Slack connector. Now, this is where we start to showcase the power of HubSpot's automation, because HubSpot's Slack connector isn't just like, oh, the two connect. You can also automate the creation of channels in Slack based upon actions in HubSpot. You can perform HubSpot actions utilizing commands in Slack. So I can be looking at a Slack message, select a command, and that will execute an action in HubSpot. So these start to give you an idea of how powerful these integrations can really be. Anya, any others that come to your mind as we kind of think about like the big use cases here? I was just going through this list. I mean, we'll talk about DealHub in a little bit, but this is a really nice, example list of some of the most installed apps. Now, this particular list is for essential apps for sales. Let's go back to all categories. So I know we have a lot of clients whose website isn't on HubSpot. It might be on WordPress. So like, what does a tool like the HubSpot for WordPress connector do?
Yeah, so it basically puts a application of HubSpot in the back end of your WordPress site. So you can access contact data, you can embed forms directly onto your WordPress site, and you get really, really great analytics. Just being able to like have that very solid connector. Not saying that the HubSpot tracking code doesn't work, but there's a little bit of like manual manipulation that has to come into place. And if you forget to maybe embed it onto the footer of one of your pages, then you're not tracking. Or you have to put it into Google Search Console, and there's these, there's all of these steps. So this is really a full integration where I can come in, I can see contact data, I can see company data, and I can, operate and, add some information from HubSpot into my WordPress site as well.
Mm.
So I'd say it's a really, really robust tool. And it just takes a step. I mean, like that's what we're all looking for time back in our day. So this is one of those applications that like while not necessarily like, you don't necessarily need it. If you have the opportunity to use it, it's definitely going to save you time and give you some time back in your day. And that's what we're all trying to do.
Beautifully said. Let's talk a little bit about another example that I think is pretty advanced, which is from our friends at Kixie. So this is a power call and dialing system that allows for high volume calling environments, right? And in this particular case, what they've actually done is they've built a soft phone product that literally sits inside HubSpot. So this is another really innovative approach. The other thing I think that is important to note here, a couple of other things. One is that it's a HubSpot certified app. I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. The other thing here is that Kixie utilizes the HubSpot workflow engine. So Anya, can you give us like just a two-penny tour of like what is the HubSpot workflow engine? And then we'll talk about how ecosystem apps can connect to the workflow engine.
Yeah, so it is programmable automation based on either events or criteria being met. We now have the option to schedule events as well, which is really nice. And then there's also some advanced options. So, webhook data, being able to pull in again those applications that are outside of HubSpot and being able to trigger automation based on those things. So it's pretty robust in what you can do here, depending again on your subscription and what hubs you have access to. So that's a disclaimer here is, while we talk about all of these really, really great things that you can have and you look for them afterwards, maybe you're in HubSpot, but you're on like a starter version, these things are not going to be there. But when we talk about really how robust this tool is, you have data ops. So being able to format your data and structure your data. Marketing, so being able to operate in a marketing capacity, adding people to ad groups, adding people to lists, changing marketing status, etc. We have the actual full CRM, which is going to give you, there we go, going through it. You have the full CRM, which is everything that you could possibly want to do in your CRM as far as sharing information, creating tasks, being able to like increase, decrease property values, etc. So really just changing your CRM information, the things that are living on the actual record itself. So maybe helpful framing here is when we think of like HubSpot, we have an object, which is your house. We have a record, which is going to be your kitchen. And then we have all of your properties, which are going to be like all of your appliances and things that are in your kitchen. So, when we talk about like these different buckets and how we kind of like store information, we have the opportunity to, change the whole house. We could change the kitchen. We can, change out our stove, but it's all there and it's all capable within this automation. And then we also have the ability to communicate as well. So being able to automate your emails, being able to automate marketing emails, internal emails, communication, things like that.
So we've got communication, CRM, marketing, and data. And by the way, this is the updated workflow interface, which I think just demonstrates beautifully the power of the platform. Everything that you just described, Anya, literally has a spot right in one of these boxes. So yes, all of these things now are happening natively inside HubSpot. Now let's talk about, okay, so we've also got these connected apps. So in the example of Kixie, they've really built a deep workflow automation connection here. So these are apps that are connected from the ecosystem directory. Now, not every app utilizes or relates to the workflow engine. So for example, I was just showing the LinkedIn Sales Navigator connector. Very powerful tool, but you'll notice that it's not in this list of connected apps because it does not connect to the workflow engine. By the way, if you're wondering why, it's because you may already know this, but LinkedIn is a closed ecosystem environment. No one's allowed by LinkedIn to actually publish data to or write to the LinkedIn database. So there's no workflow presence here. We already saw, though, that was a very powerful tool. So I'm just demonstrating there are a lot of different ways to sort of skin the cat here. But in this particular example, we've got Kixie. We can add and remove contacts from your power list in Kixie. We can make calls, send SMS messages in an automated manner, put people in a queue. One of the things that the folks at Kixie love to demonstrate, which I think is enormously powerful, and we use it, is if you call someone and they don't answer, you leave a voicemail, but then they turn around and go to the website, you can be notified of that action, and then you can immediately place a follow-up call to them because you know they're at their desk. So there are a lot of things you can do to increase engagement with people. Now, I know we want to talk a little bit about InCycle, which is one of your favorite tools, Anya. Tell us a little bit about InCycle and how data management tools like that also add value to the HubSpot environment.
Yeah, so I would say for InCycle specifically, this is one of those use cases where you can accomplish a lot of these things in HubSpot natively, but it's not as intuitive as taking it into this third-party application. So if like tech isn't your thing or you don't want to learn how to create a workflow, like these are the places in which it's going to pull that information from your database and guide you on how you can better, resolve your data integrity issues or create associations and relationships between different like objects. So when we look at this, when it's saying it's open. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about run, custom recipes, basically what you do in Hub or in InCycle is you create recipes. So when a contact matches these fields, they need to do this. Or when you see two contacts that have the same email or the same first name and things like that, like, merge those contacts. Again, calling out like HubSpot, maybe email wasn't like the best option here because email is what HubSpot uses as a unique identifier for a contact to deduplicate. But if you get Anya Tijerina at Gmail and you get Anya at Wendt Partners that both fill out a form, HubSpot's not smart enough to pick those things up. So you look for different things that are going to meet that criteria to merge those two people together. That helps your data integrity. It makes sure that you're not sending out the same marketing email to the same person who gave you two different emails. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with this tool. And so I'm a really, really big fan of it just because I found that as far as like user adaptability and, just beginning to kind of like frame how HubSpot works, this tool does a really great job of explaining, what you're looking for and what the action is going to be. And then it can execute on that action as well.
Mm.
The other thing I just want to call out about this, and then I'll stop talking about InCycle.
No, no, you're doing
I
great.
don't
Keep
work for
rolling.
InCycle, but I love them. So when you have the Salesforce connector in place in HubSpot, so your
Mm-hmm.
sales team is working in Salesforce, your marketing team's in HubSpot, you cannot use the deduplication function in HubSpot for companies. It doesn't allow that to happen. Salesforce says no. So
Right.
you
And
cannot
that's because of a Salesforce database structure issue, not a HubSpot limitation.
Correct. But we often find, a lot of these companies who are coming from Salesforce legacy system, we've been in there since 1998, and
Right.
we have, 12 of the same company.
I think you just I think you just made fun of my age, but it's okay. I'll let you go. We've been in since 1998. I'm like, yeah. Oh, right. 1998. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I
You know,
got it.
we've been in there for a while. At one point, I did this all on, a scrap piece of paper and I went to their door, like those kind of things are in there. So
Again, she's describing my sales career. So, all right.
we have like all of these companies
I
and
still miss DOS. Okay, folks.
there we
Go
go.
for it.
We love it. We know that it happens, but this tool actually allows you to merge that data and take care of your data integrity issues. So this is another thing of if you're up against that, that initial friction, which we
Right.
experience quite a bit in this ecosystem is, you know, we're making the change where we have two different teams in two different areas, but we need them to talk to each other. InCycle is the tool that I always recommend to pull your data, clean it up, and then be able to have like really nice and clean data in HubSpot without having to go through a bunch of different steps of
Right.
uninstalling or loading things into sandboxes. So just
Yes.
to kind of keep everything moving while also maintaining your data integrity.
And I want to go back to that example you gave earlier about like the two Anya Tijerinas. So, on the face of it, you say, well, geez, it's the same first name, two different email addresses must be the same person. Of course, it may not be the same person. So one of the things that you can do with tools like InCycle is you can set up a series of gate checks and say, well, if the two records are both for a person in Cleveland or that have the same area code or some other identifying information, then we can say with 95% assurance it is a duplicate and we can merge the two, right? As opposed to just an all or nothing scenario. So I think that's really important because a lot of people, there's a lot to think about here in terms of how you structure and clean your data. It's not obvious. And I think we often underestimate how much human thinking is going into the process, right? It's kind of like self-driving cars. If it were that easy, we'd all be the Jetsons by now. It's not, which is why even though technology keeps evolving, there is still an enormous amount of the human factor. And what we're trying to do is model that using tools like InCycle. Which brings us back to, okay, I'm looking at all these different tools. They're enormously powerful. How do I select? What do I need to know when I'm in the HubSpot ecosystem directory to select a good tool for my use case? So I thought we'd use the Kixie example and let's go through and just talk about the different elements of a profile here, right? So one of them is, and again, I promise we'll come back and talk about what is a HubSpot certified app. But I always encourage people, there are a number of factors here that are really important to look at. So obviously one is features. Okay. Is it actually doing the thing that I think it is? Okay. This seems to be pretty robust. We've got the automation piece for both calls and texts. We've got the overlay of the power dialer. We know it works inside the workflow engine. You can see that they're emphasizing that here. So you can get a really good picture because remember, not all these tools are created to the same level of sophistication. The level of sophistication varies widely, depending on what the tool's designed to do. In this particular case, the Kixie tool, the Kixie ecosystem connector is very, very powerful. Okay, we see automation, we see workflows, we see overlay. Now, the next piece a lot of people skip is they skip the shared data piece. I see this happen all the time with folks, not in the Kixie example. I'm just saying in general, people say, oh, there's a connector between HubSpot and blah, blah, blah. Okay. But does the data flow the way that you need? For example, in the Kixie example, we see here that contacts flow both ways. So if I create a new contact from my Kixie calls, it will create that new contact in HubSpot. Deals, and there's no problem with this, but deals go from HubSpot to Kixie and engagements come from Kixie back to HubSpot. All that makes sense. But I'll give you an example. We actually are talking with a client about Tableau, which is one of the BI tools. Power BI is probably the most commonly used, but another one that we see a lot of is Tableau. And the customer said, I want to integrate HubSpot and Tableau. And what they described in their use case was actually pulling Tableau data into HubSpot. And when I showed them the first connector tool that we looked at, it only pulled HubSpot data from HubSpot to Tableau, which is not a flaw. That's the most common use case. I want to take my HubSpot data and I want to get it into Tableau. Okay. But this customer wanted to do the reverse. So we took a different approach using a different tool and a different process. But that's the point. Just because the two tools, the two logos show up next to each other, okay, just because there's a connector doesn't mean it's your connector. And if you really want to make sure it's going to meet your use case requirements, look at that shared data and the data flow. A lot of tools are one way. Also, does it give the flexibility of what I need? Now, again, the Kixie example is quite straightforward, but I see a lot of cases where a connector doesn't support custom objects, or maybe it supports some standard objects and not others. Like there's a lot you really need to, take a moment and think this through before just making an assumption. The next area where we see, and actually I'm going to show the LinkedIn one to kind of continue this example. The next thing that I always point out to people is the plan requirements. The plan requirements. This is the next thing that catches people off. So, okay, actually, that's funny. It says free. All right, I see. That's the standard LinkedIn one. I meant the Sales Navigator one. So I pulled up the wrong one. Let me switch here. Okay, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. This is the one that I was demoing, right? That has the card inside HubSpot and does all that cool stuff. So you think, okay, well, I should be able to use it with any, Sales Navigator account. You come down here, great. It relates connections to contacts, InMail to contacts. That makes sense. Oh, what LinkedIn Sales Navigator version do I need? And you can see here, I need Sales Navigator Advanced. Guess what? 8 out of 10 salespeople who have LinkedIn Sales Navigator, maybe even 9 out of 10, don't have Advanced. I call Advanced the unnecessarily overpriced version because it's literally about double the cost of the base Sales Navigator account. Okay. In order to use this functionality, and that's not a HubSpot thing, that's a LinkedIn thing. So it's really important that you check what version of the other product you need in order to get the functionality. Sometimes you will see that there are different options. For example, QuickBooks Online has a very robust connection to HubSpot, but depending on what QuickBooks edition you have, it unlocks certain levels of functionality. Okay, just like Anya, as you were saying earlier, in order to use the workflow functionality in HubSpot, you have to have a professional edition hub. In a similar case, you can't do certain things in QuickBooks Online unless you have the right edition. So that's the next piece of the equation, okay, is check those requirements. And then let's go back to the Kixie example and talk about the last piece, which is reviews. Now, in Kixie's case, because they're amazing, they get spectacular ratings and reviews, okay, which is great. And you can see here very positive feedback. However, it's important to understand when you look at these connectors, a lot of them have very inconsistent feedback. You'll see 4 and 5, and then you'll see 1 and 2, and then 4 and 5 again, and 1 and 2. Not the case with Kixie, but the case with a lot of products. You want to know why? It's because people are expecting more than the product is designed to do because they probably didn't check the data flow. They didn't check the required addition of the other product, and they didn't think about their use case. So even though these tools are, one click, I mean, literally, if I was logged into my HubSpot account with one click, I could go in and add the Kixie Power Call tool. But I don't want anyone to set themselves up for a disappointment by going, oh, great, click a button and then you're set. You have to make sure that the application is designed to solve for the need that you're trying to address. Okay. For example, in that LinkedIn Sales Navigator, that's a Sales Navigator connector. So if you're looking to send, it'll do connection requests and InMail. But if you're looking to do regular LinkedIn messaging, it's not supported in the Sales Navigator connector because that's not a Sales Navigator function. So it's really important to think about the right tool for the job. Imagine a plumber shows up at your house with, a couple of different toolboxes. We got 1,500 tools in this toolbox. Okay. But it doesn't matter if you choose a wrench. Okay. If that wrench is not designed, for the particular fitting that you're trying to open up or close. So being thoughtful about this is really, really important. What are some other things, Anya, in your experience that you've seen both, the wins and the challenges for clients when they're using the ecosystem connectors or selecting ones for their use case?
So I think the other thing is your plan compatibility.
Mm.
So what you are on determines what applications are available to you. So if we look at the example of like Microsoft Dynamics, for instance,
I'll
Dynamics
actually pull that one up. Go ahead. Yep.
Dynamics, you have to have a certain plan in order to be able to access it. And then the other piece is while might show that it's compatible with your plan, great, we can sync, these standard like default field mappings. You'll also see in there that little sneaky additional fields available with custom field mappings that require Operations Hub. So
Mm.
there are different things, and this is a really great example. If you scroll down a little bit to the bottom too, is, like when we're talking about the different hubs and sorry, up a little, yeah, right there
Yeah.
where we see CMS and like Dynamics HubSpot features. So while we can share this data, there's also some limitations of, we can share list segmentation, but do you have CMS? Is there, custom field mappings? Do you have operations? So while you do see sometimes it says, oh yeah, compatible with your plan, it's compatible to an extent.
Right.
The other pieces do need to come in as well, where you kind of have to figure out, is it worth upgrading our system? Is this something that makes a little bit more sense for us to spend the money up front and do a custom integration versus, relying on an app that's going to sync information and then we have to upgrade our hubs to receive that information. So it's really that's like the other really big conversation that a lot of companies have is, are we going to spend X amount of dollars every single month maintaining a HubSpot subscription, maintaining a subscription to this outside application, making sure that this sync is going to receive information properly from this, third party? Or do we want to invest up front, spend a little bit more money? It'll shock you, but it's one time and then
Right.
it's done. And you know
Right.
that the data that you want to bring over is being brought over. And that's the other side of it is, we have really, really native built-in applications that we are able to leverage that are intuitive, that are easy to install. They have setup guides. You can contact support. They're excellent. And then you have the other side, which is HubSpot's really robust API, which allows you to customize your integrations and share the data that you want to share and put gates and parameters around how information is shared between your systems.
Mm.
So those are really the two things is looking at the investment upfront versus, looking at your monthly investment in order to share data as well. So that's the final thing to
Yeah.
come out is, when you're having those conversations, of course, HubSpot can integrate. HubSpot can do that because it can, but it's going to be a price. And at what point do we say we're going to maintain this for 5 years for X amount of dollars, or we're going to have a system that's integrated that we're going to pay for upfront?
You know what? I'm going to throw a couple of thoughts out there that really this one. So first of all, you're absolutely right. And can you just take a moment and explain, you mentioned Operations Hub Professional or Operations Hub Enterprise. So Operations Hub Professional from HubSpot is required to move the needle on some of these integrations to a higher degree. Can you just clarify an example of that?
Yeah, so we have, very like standard like field mappings, things that are built out in HubSpot that, the apps have already agreed that they're sharing that information.
Hmm.
And then we have, an iteration. At some point, they said, oh, great, well, we're going to modify our solution. But that requires the Operations Hub sync in order to bring that information over because they're not scrapping the original app and throwing it out and saying we're redoing the app so we can bring in all of these like new fields. Like, no, they're going to rely on Operations Hub Sync to bring over those custom fields. So it's a modification, not necessarily a redo or
Right.
redevelopment. So that is where you'll see some of those things come in. Or obviously, like if you're connecting to external platforms, Snowflake, things like that, those are all the things that we really, really rely on Operations Hub to do because it brings that information in seamlessly.
And like you talked about, it's sort of sneaky. I mean, it really is. Like here it says integrates with these HubSpot features. Here it is that it mentions custom field mappings are tied to Operations Hub. and like you have to have a CMS hub in order to use list segmentation and so forth. Like what this really is an indicator of what HubSpot modules you need to have in order to get some of this functionality out of the tool. So the other thing that I think this particular example really brings up is, gee, what Microsoft Dynamics 365 product are we talking about here? Now, this is not an issue with HubSpot. We sell one product that has 6 hubs. That's it. Okay. But in the world of companies like Microsoft, Dynamics 365 is a brand name for 20 different products. Is this the CRM? Which is actually what it is. This actually should say Microsoft Dynamics 365 CRM. This is specifically designed to connect HubSpot marketing capability with Dynamics 365 CRM. You see that down in here. It's talking about the sales tools. Okay. But if you're a company that has Microsoft Dynamics 365 ERP, which used to be called Great Plains or Navision, okay, guess what? This is not for you, because you can see down here that it's designed to work with these Microsoft Dynamics products. So when you deal with companies that, use one brand name for 20 different products, Epicor, I'm looking at you, okay, you have to be really careful to make sure that this was actually built for the product that you're trying to connect to. So I know it feels like a minefield, and to some extent it is. The good news is that's why we're here. I mean, we advise clients, we walk through this stuff day in and day out. I probably am showing a client an example of an ecosystem product at least twice a day. So that's okay. That's why we do this. Okay. It doesn't have to be complicated. This is a very clean presentation, right? And with a lot of products, it's very straightforward. But what you're learning in this discussion is that definition is straightforward. That varies widely depending on the kind of product you're connecting to. Connecting to my Zoom meetings is not the same as connecting to my ERP system. These are in different categories of complexity. Okay. And by the way, now that Zoom is also a phone provider, that's another example. I could connect Zoom to HubSpot, but only be syncing meeting data and not be syncing webinar data, because that's a different plan, or phone service. So again, got to think about these things. Let's talk a little bit about HubSpot certified apps. We've seen this here. Approximately 400 out of the 1,550 apps in the ecosystem are HubSpot certified. So I want to first mention, I'd say our average client has a combination of HubSpot certified and non-certified apps. Every app that shows up in the HubSpot ecosystem directory has to go through a minimal validation process. So everything in here is at least inside the walled garden. Okay. You can't just throw one on here. You have to submit it to HubSpot and they have to approve it, which, by the way, means if you are utilizing a connector to HubSpot that's not in this directory, caution. Okay. It's not necessarily a hard no, but definitely proceed with caution, because nobody at HubSpot's looked at it. We have no idea how it's interacting with the HubSpot database and whether it's stable or not. Okay. So first and foremost, you should be looking in the directory. The second thing is, companies have the opportunity, software vendors have the opportunity to take the additional step of becoming a HubSpot certified app. I really am a believer in this model. And the reason is because what it provides you in terms of added security and stability for your selection. So these products have to have been in the ecosystem directory for at least 6 months. So they can't just have been built yesterday. And they have to meet an extensive set of requirements around security, reliability, usability, and overall value to the customer. So as you can see here, and I'm not going to read them all, but there are specific security parameters. For example, HubSpot developed a much more exclusive and limited model for accessing APIs. So it used to be that you could just generate an API key and have access to the keys to the whole kingdom. Now we generate API keys that are actually, they're called private apps, and they're specific to certain functionality in HubSpot. So if you only need to access the contacts table, you give the application access just to the contacts table. Okay. And that authentication is specific to the contacts table. That's a really important security requirement. Making sure that the domain is validated, making sure that the app is reliable, that it has high performance standards, that it meets our API usage guidelines for HubSpot, that the success rate of those functions is 95% or greater for all API calls that are actually executed. And then on usability, similar requirements here. Do customers think it's a useful tool? Does it meet the technical requirements to be high quality as an application? And then finally, the value of the actual execution. In the value area, there's another thing that I think is really important here. HubSpot has certain best practices for how applications should interact with the HubSpot platform. So, for example, if you're going to develop a product that's going to be HubSpot certified, you want it to utilize the HubSpot extension card or CRM card function. That's what I showed when we were looking at, for example, Sales Navigator. That little card, that's a CRM card. Custom workflow actions, we saw that with the Kixie example. So again, not required, okay, but important to understand that having apps that are HubSpot certified definitely adds an additional layer of quality control as you build out your RevOps tech stack. So Anya, let's come back to where we started here in the final few minutes. And let me just mention to our audience, if you want to ask a question, just go ahead, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can type your question and we'll make sure to answer it for you here in our last 5 minutes. Anya, let's go back and say, where we started. We talked about RevOps, right? And you said it's like the, non-GMO certified. I love that. Or the organic label. So if you were advising someone who's attending this webinar and you're like, look, they say, where should I start? Where should I start in my process of like building that tech stack, building my RevOps environment? I've selected HubSpot. I'm looking at the ecosystem. Where would you tell someone to go next? What should their next step be?
The biggest thing about RevOps is your people. So it really starts with those department interviews. So we have been doing the same thing at Wendt Partners. We have an internal project going on right now where we're completely revamping our entire portal. And it all started with department interviews. Tell me what systems you're using. They're like, oh, we're using these. And we're like, great. We have like 50 systems that we're paying for. And we're using like so it's all of those things of, getting
True
that,
statement.
getting that feedback, knowing where we're experiencing gaps. A lot of time these conversations come up and we're like, look at these results, they're terrible. Tell us, why things are going so poorly. When really we should approach it a little bit more proactively of saying, tell me how you're running your day. Like, tell me where you're experiencing friction or gaps. Tell me where you could use more support. Tell me what you're spending a lot of time doing. Are you spending a lot of time sending the same email over and over again? Great. That's a use case for templates. So, really understanding what your team is doing and then making that decision of, if you're going to go with HubSpot, if you're going to go with, another platform, if you're going to go with HubSpot
There's
with a
another
bunch of,
platform worth considering. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. I had
Yes.
dial-up once and I didn't love it, so I wouldn't recommend the other one. But no, just kidding. It's all fair here and fun. But that's the biggest thing is understanding your people, understanding the friction, and then looking to solve it with technology and your tech stack. Again, HubSpot could be a complete solution, but don't box yourself in. We want to create a scalable solution. At the
Hmm.
end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're looking at revenue operations and looking to optimize processes by making sure that we're able to scale in a way that's consistent, in a way that makes sense for our teams. So that's really where I start. Start with your people and then compare their friction, compare their feedback to different tools or offerings that you have available to you. And consider HubSpot as a partner that's going to help you scale your business and scale your team's success.
Beautiful. Anya, I think you nailed it. And you're right. We're literally going through this journey ourselves. So I want to thank you, Anya, for taking time out of your very busy day. And everybody who joined us, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. I hope you found this hour extremely insightful, helpful. If you have any questions, my email address is doug@wendtpartners.com. And we look forward to helping you out on your journey of building the right customer experience and the right RevOps tech stack for your team with the power of HubSpot. Thanks again, Anya. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.